If there's one thing I've learned in my 21 years on this planet, it's that family can be the sharpest double-edged sword. I'm Luke, and I've spent most of my life walking the tightrope between trying to keep peace and wondering if it was even worth keeping. My mom died when I was 9, car accident, drunk driver, middle of the afternoon. One minute she was helping me with a school project, and the next, I was staring out the window at 2 cops in pressed uniforms knocking on our front door. My dad was never the same after that. I don't think I was either. We had a few good years, though. Just me and him. He was the kind of guy who didn't say much unless it mattered. Loved old jazz records, collected antique radios, drank his coffee black, and treated me like I had a brain even when I was just a kid. He taught me how to wire an outlet before I was in middle school, and we'd sit for hours fixing up old stuff he found at yard sales. He'd say things like, "Don't throw away what still works." That goes for people too. I think about that a lot these days. Then he got sick. Pancreatic cancer doesn't leave much room for goodbyes. He was gone within 8 months. I was 16. That was the first time I felt the ground shift under me. The second time was a year later, when my mom's old friend Diane started coming around. At first, I thought she was just being nice. Checking in, dropping off food, asking if I needed help with bills or groceries. I didn't. Dad had left a small trust in my name, and the house was fully paid off. But it was still kind of her. Or so I thought. Diane had this way of smiling like she was already winning something, like every conversation was a game she'd mastered years ago. She moved in just after my 18th birthday. "Just for a few weeks," she said, "while I get back on my feet." She brought her grown son with her. Wade was 25 going on 45, and not in a good way. He had the shoulders of a linebacker and the ambition of a potato. The kind of guy who referred to himself as an entrepreneur but never actually left the couch. His biggest achievement, from what I could tell, was hitting level 300 on some mobile game that involved dragons and matching gems. I tried to be civil. I really did. But it was hard to ignore how he'd drink the last of the milk and leave the carton in the fridge. Or how he'd blast his TV shows at full volume at 2 in the morning. Or how he'd make these passive-aggressive comments anytime I reminded him it was my dad's house. By the time Diane and Wade had been living with me for 6 months, that few weeks' excuse had been quietly buried. I was working part-time at a repair shop and studying for my electrical certification. They, on the other hand, treated the house like a free Airbnb. Diane redecorated the kitchen without asking. Wade converted the guest room into his personal gaming cave, complete with blackout curtains and a "Do Not Disturb" sign he made out of duct tape. When I mentioned the rising utility bills, Diane gave me this patronizing little pat on the shoulder and said, "Well, sweetie, that's just part of being an adult." Still, I try not to push. I figured they'd get bored eventually and leave. I kept to myself in the basement most days. It was a finished space with a small bathroom, my dad's old radio collection, and a door that actually locked. It felt like the only part of the house that still belonged to me. Sometimes I'd just sit down there with the lights off, listening to his old jazz records spin through the static, pretending he was still upstairs, flipping through the newspaper and grumbling about gas prices. Then one evening, about a year into their temporary stay, Diane sat me down in the living room. Wade was perched on the recliner, half listening with a smirk as he scrolled on his phone. She had that same rehearsed smile I'd seen a dozen times before, like she was preparing to offer a business deal that only benefited her. "Luke," she began, folding her hands over her knee. "You're 21 now, a grown man, and I think it's time we talk about responsibilities." I didn't say anything, just watched as she adjusted a throw pillow like the conversation was a casual chat over tea. She continued, "You've been living down in that basement rent-free for a while now. I know it was your dad's house, but things are different these days. There are expenses, and well, Wade and I have been shouldering a lot of that." I blinked. "You what?" She raised an eyebrow. "The bills, sweetie. Electricity, water, internet. It adds up." I glanced over at Wade, who didn't even look up. I wanted to laugh. Or scream. Maybe both. But I kept my voice steady. "I've been paying the bills out of the house account. The one my dad set up. You've seen the statements." She waved that off like it was a minor detail. "Yes, but that's not the point. It's about fairness. You're a man now, and men contribute. I think $1,200 a month is fair, considering what you're getting. A private space, your own bathroom, access to everything upstairs." I stared at her. "You want me to pay you rent? To live in my dad's house?" Her smile didn't budge. Well, it's not just your dad's house anymore. It's a shared space. Wade finally chimed in with a lazy chuckle. Yeah, bro, time to stop living off other people, right? That was the moment something snapped. Not loudly, not in a rage. It was quiet, like a slow, cold realization settling in the pit of my stomach. I looked at Wade, then back at Diane. I nodded. You're right, I said calmly. It's time I stopped living off other people. I went back downstairs, shut the door behind me, and locked it. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the old couch, listening to a Miles Davis record, heart racing, mind spinning. Because what they didn't know, what my dad had arranged years ago, was that the deed to the house wasn't in his name when he passed. It was in mine. He'd transferred it quietly when I turned 16. Said it was a backup plan. Just in case anything ever happens, he told me. This way, no one can take what's yours. I hadn't thought much of it then. But sitting there, with Wade's voice echoing in my ears, I realized it was time to use that plan. Not out of spite, not out of anger, but because sometimes the only way to protect what's yours is to remind people that it's yours to begin with. And so, while Diane and Wade planned their upcoming vacation to Florida, 7 full days of sun, margaritas, and bragging on Facebook, I started planning something of my own. I just needed to wait. Let them pack. Let them leave. Let them think they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. When Diane and Wade left for Florida, I smiled and waved from the driveway like the obedient little housemate they believed I'd become. Diane wore one of those oversized sun hats that looked like it belonged in a vineyard, and Wade was dragging a suitcase with wheels so squeaky it sounded like a rat having a panic attack. They were both giddy, high off the idea of a tropical escape, and more importantly, the belief that I was finally going to start contributing. Wade threw me a mock salute from the passenger seat. Try not to throw a rave while we're gone, basement boy. I gave a thumbs up. No promises. The car disappeared down the street. I stood there in silence for a long moment, then turned and looked at the house, my house, and finally exhaled. The week that followed was a mix of bitter satisfaction and cold logistics. I met with the family lawyer my dad had trusted, the same one who'd handled the title transfer when I was 16. We went over the deed, the documentation, the timeline. Legally, everything was airtight. My father had made sure of that. The house was in my name alone, and no amount of shared space, nonsense could override that. But I wasn't going to kick them out with a text or a phone call. No, that would have been too clean, too easy. What they deserved wasn't just a push, it was a wake-up call, and I was more than happy to deliver it. Still, I had time to kill before the storm hit, and in that time, I found myself reflecting, probably more than I should have. The memories of how things had gone so off course kept creeping in, flashing through my mind like a broken film reel. It didn't start with the rent demand. That was just the final straw. The truth is, things had been rotting from the inside for a long while. I remembered the first time Diane ever corrected me for calling it my house. It was during a barbecue she had thrown, without asking, of course. I came upstairs and found a bunch of her friends in the living room, half drunk on white wine and gossiping about their exes. I pulled her aside and said, "Hey, just a heads up, next time you want to have people over, can you let me know first?" She gave me that same condescending laugh she always used when I asked for basic respect. "Oh, Luke, don't be territorial. This is our space now. You can't just claim it like a dog peeing on a tree." I wanted to scream, but instead, I just went back downstairs. Again, then there was Wade's little business ventures. He once borrowed my laptop while I was at work because his gaming rig wasn't compatible with PDFs, apparently. When I came back, I found my personal files reorganized, my search history wiped, and 2 weird desktop folders labeled Passive Income Mastery and Crypto Boom 2.0. I confronted him, and he just shrugged. "Chill, bro. I didn't touch your stuff. Just needed it for a quick Zoom pitch." That quick pitch turned out to be a shady online pyramid scheme where he was selling digital courses to desperate strangers, promising them financial freedom and a yacht lifestyle if they bought into his $999 mentorship program. I told him to never touch my stuff again. He said I was being dramatic. Diane said I was being selfish. It kept piling on. One time, I came home to find all the lights on, the AC blasting at 65 degrees, and both of them asleep on the couch surrounded by empty takeout containers. When I asked them to be more mindful about energy usage, Wade said, relax. You act like you're paying the bills or something. I was. And yet somehow, in their eyes, I was the ungrateful one, the leech, the freeloader. But the worst moment, the one that really broke me, came just 2 weeks before their vacation. It was a Sunday morning, and I was working on restoring one of my dad's old radios down in the basement. I had it cracked open on the table, wires and dust, and little brass components scattered like puzzle pieces. It was meditative, almost peaceful, until I heard a crash from upstairs. Then laughter. I froze for a second, hard in my throat, then rushed up to the kitchen. There, in the middle of the floor, was one of my dad's antique radios, the one he'd always kept in the den, a sleek 1940s RCA with walnut casing and golden dials. It was shattered. Pieces of it lay like splinters across the tiles. Diane was standing nearby, clutching a broom, looking sheepish. Wade was laughing like he'd just watched a comedy special. "What happened?" I asked, my voice low but shaking. Diane winced. "I'm so sorry, sweetie. I was trying to rearrange the shelf in the hallway, and it just slipped." "You what?" She gave me that fake pout. "I thought the shelf would look better above the dining table. More open." Wade snorted. "Dude, it's just some dusty old junk. You've got like 10 of them downstairs." My jaw clenched. That was my dad's. He restored that by hand. He taught me how to rewire using that radio. "Oh, don't be so sentimental," Diane huffed, now annoyed. "It's just stuff. You need to learn to let go." Honestly, it was taking up space anyway. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I just turned around and walked out the front door. Drove to the edge of town and sat in my car at the overlook for hours, staring out at nothing, clutching the old screwdriver that used to sit next to that radio, like it was some kind of sacred relic. That was when the numbness started to fade, and something else took its place. Resolve. When I got home that night, the shattered pieces had been swept away. No apology note. No mention of it at dinner. It was like it never happened. I realized then that I'd become a ghost in my own house. But ghosts have a funny way of haunting. The days crawled by until their vacation. Wade kept posting countdowns on Instagram. For more days until paradise, baby. Diane was busy buying new sandals and trying on swimsuits in front of the hallway mirror, asking Wade for opinions. I mostly stayed out of sight. Let them forget I was even there. When the day finally came, they left in a whirlwind of sunscreen and entitlement. I waited until the taillights disappeared, then shut the front door behind me with the calm of a man stepping into a chess match 5 moves ahead. I didn't waste a second. Called the lawyer. Signed the paperwork. Got the ball rolling on a formal notice of revocation of permission to occupy the property. All legal. All clean. All based on the fact that they were guests. Guests who had overstayed their welcome. I contacted a locksmith to change every single lock in the house, garage door included. I packed their belongings into labeled boxes and neatly stacked them in the garage. I didn't touch anything personal, just made sure it was ready for pickup. And then I sat down and wrote the note. Not angry, not dramatic, just 5 lines. "Diane, you were right. It's time I stopped living off other people. So I sold the house. You've got until Sunday to pick up your things. Luke." Only. I hadn't actually sold the house yet. That part was just the bait. Because what I needed now wasn't a clean break. I needed them to feel it. To see, in real time, what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Because when they came back early, 2 days early, sunburned and furious, pounding on the front door like they were about to tear it off the hinges, I realized something I hadn't anticipated. They weren't just entitled. They were desperate. And desperate people do stupid things. They came back on a Thursday. I was in the basement, mid-call with my mentor from the electrical trade program, going over a final project I'd been dragging my feet on. We were talking about grounding methods and conduit sizes when the first knock came, loud, flat-palmed, full of rage. Not a casual knock. Not even a "where's my package" knock. No, this was the kind of knock you hear in movies right before a door gets kicked in. Then the yelling started. "Luke, open this door right now." Diane's voice pierced through the floorboards, shrill and furious. I paused, staring at the ceiling, heart ticking like a stopwatch. My mentor's voice on the phone went fuzzy in my ear. "Everything all right, Luke?" he asked. I swallowed hard. "Yeah, I think this is going to be the most productive week of my life." I hung up, then walked upstairs, slowly, calmly, like I'd rehearsed it. Because I had. 1,000 times. I opened the front door just enough to see them both standing there, tan lines around their sunglasses, suitcases behind them, and looks on their faces like they'd just found out someone had burned down their beach resort. Wade stepped forward first. "What is this? Why are the locks changed?" Diane was already fumbling in her bag. "You better have a damn good explanation, young man. I don't know what game you think you're playing, but this is our house too. We live here. You can't just lock us out like squatters." I tilted my head. "I thought you were staying until Sunday. Didn't expect you two back so soon." Wade jabbed a finger at me. "You sold the house." I shrugged. "Technically, no. I said I did. But I'm definitely planning to. Just figured I'd give you a heads up." Diane's eyes widened. "You have no right. It's in my name." I cut in, voice calm, almost bored. "Has been since I was 16. Look it up. The lawyer's name is printed on the back of the notice taped to the garage door. You've got until Sunday to pick up your stuff." Wade's face turned red like a ripe tomato. "You little rat. We took care of you. We gave you a home. You gave me a headache," I said, and shut the door. I wish I could say I felt triumphant. I wish I could tell you I stood there afterward, proud, confident, basking in the justice of it all. But I didn't. I slid down to the floor and just sat there, breathing shallow, hands shaking. It was one thing to fantasize about standing up for yourself. It was another thing entirely to actually do it. Because here's the truth nobody tells you about revenge, or reclaiming power, or whatever poetic name people give it when they finally stop being doormats. It's lonely. Terrifying, even. And for the next several days, that's what I wrestled with. They camped outside the house that first night. I kid you not. Diane slept in the car. Wade snored in a lawn chair under the porch light, like he was some war hero on night watch. I kept the blinds drawn and the lights off. It felt surreal, like I was in a twisted reality show with no exit. The second day, Diane started calling everyone in the neighborhood, spinning some story about how I was an ungrateful punk who'd forged paperwork and stolen the house. One of the neighbors, Mrs. Porter, texted me directly and said, "Don't worry, Luke. We know what kind of woman Diane is." Still, the damage hurt. Hearing your name dragged through the mud by someone who calls you family, it messes with your head. By Saturday, they gave up. Or maybe they finally realized they were out of moves. Diane came one last time to pick up their stuff from the garage. She didn't say a word, just stared at me with this hollow, bitter glare like she was mentally hexing me. Wade muttered something under his breath, probably another insult, but even he looked tired. I didn't watch them leave. I just waited until the car door slammed and the tires squealed out of the driveway. And then I cried. Not because I missed them, not because I regretted it, but because it was over. The weird, miserable chapter that had been hanging over my life like a storm cloud gone. The silence in the house was strange. Too quiet. No late-night TV blaring upstairs. No burned smells from Wade's half-baked attempts at protein meal prep. No Diane in the kitchen criticizing me for not being ambitious enough. Just quiet. I spent the next few days floating between exhaustion and disbelief. Every room in the house felt different now. Cleaner, lighter, but emptier too. I didn't realize how much of myself I'd buried in the basement just to survive. It was like finally taking a breath after holding it for 3 years. And once I'd taken that breath, I started to rebuild. Slowly, quietly, like a man sweeping out the rubble after an earthquake. The first thing I did was start turning the basement into a proper studio. I used some of the trust money my dad had left me. Not much, just enough to replace the old couch, put up new lighting, and buy a proper workbench. I organized all of Dad's tools, polished every radio, and lined them on the shelves like sacred relics. It felt like bringing him back, piece by piece. Then I got serious about my career. I stopped procrastinating and threw myself into my electrical training. I passed my certification exams in 2 months flat. No retakes. I even got an internship with a local contracting company that did historical restorations. Wiring old buildings, vintage theaters, stuff that felt like it was alive with the past. It was perfect. The boss, Mr. Kinley, was this grizzled old guy with a beard that looked like it had survived 3 wars. He reminded me of my dad in weird ways, quiet, direct, always had a sandwich on him. One day, I stayed after a job to help him fix a circuit panel nobody else could figure out, and he looked at me and said, "You ever think of running your own outfit someday?" I laughed. One step at a time, man. But the thought stuck. Outside of work, I started reconnecting with people. I had kept myself so closed off during the Diane and Wade era that I'd lost touch with half my world. I started calling old friends, made weekend plans, cooked meals that didn't come in microwave trays. I even bought real plates, with matching forks. It wasn't a dramatic, overnight transformation. I wasn't suddenly glowing with self-worth or meditating at sunrise. But every small thing I did felt like reclaiming a little piece of myself. And then, something wild happened. I got a letter. It arrived in a thick envelope, no return address. Inside was a single-page note and a check from Diane. The note read, "Luke, I know you hate me. I probably deserve it. I didn't realize how much pain I was still carrying from losing your mom. Maybe I tried to replace her role in your life and overstepped. I'm sorry I hurt you. And I'm sorry Wade treated you the way he did. I wish I'd done more to stop it. We're staying with my sister for now. Wade is looking for work. I'm trying to make things right, in whatever small way I can. If you don't want to cash the check, I understand. But I hope you do. Take care of yourself. D." The check was for $1,200. I stared at it for a long time. And then, for the first time in forever, I laughed. Not bitterly, not out of disbelief, just genuinely laughed. It didn't change anything. It didn't undo the years of manipulation, the shattered radio, the months of feeling like an intruder in my own home. But it was something, an acknowledgement, a surrender, maybe even the first honest gesture she'd made in years. I never cashed the check, but I framed the note. I hung it on the wall of my basement studio, right above my dad's old RCA radio, the one I spent weeks repairing after the pieces had sat in a box. It's still a little scratched, still a little off-center, but it works. It plays music again, just like I do. Things aren't perfect. They never will be. But I've found a rhythm again, my own rhythm, and I'm not living off other people anymore. I'm just living. But I'd be lying if I said that was the end. Because as it turns out, Diane and Wade weren't done with me yet. Not by a long shot. I don't know what made me open the voicemail. Maybe I was feeling too good. Maybe the quiet was too peaceful. Maybe I just had a hunch that the universe doesn't let you heal without throwing one more rock in your path to see if you're serious about it. It was 2 months after Diane and Wade had officially left my life. I was driving home from a job site, hands still smelling faintly of copper and dust, when I saw the notification on my phone, new voicemail from unknown. Curiosity won out. "Hey Luke, it's Wade. Don't hang up, all right? I'm not calling to fight. I know things went sideways. Real bad. But, man, I think we both know this isn't how family should be. Look, I've got a business opportunity. Big one. A real shot. But I need help getting it off the ground. You've always been smart with this stuff. I figured maybe we could talk. No pressure. Just think about it." I almost dropped the phone. There was something so familiar in that voice. Not just the laziness or the oily charm, but the nerve. Like he'd forgotten the part where he tried to evict me from my own house. Like we were just a couple of bros patching things up after a minor disagreement. But I didn't delete the message. I listened to it again and again, because underneath the fake sincerity, there was something else. Desperation. And that was valuable. For weeks, I didn't respond. I let it simmer. I wanted to see if he'd follow up. He did. 3 more voicemails, each more pathetic than the last. The second was more businessy. The third was borderline begging. The fourth? That was the one that made me sit up straight. "All right, man. I get it. You're mad. I messed up. But look, we're in trouble. Mom's sister kicked us out. We've been staying at this motel, and it's draining everything. I'm trying to get a gig, but no one's calling back. And Mom's not doing great. She's got this cough, man, and she won't go to a doctor. I figured maybe you could help, even if it's just a loan." There it was. The crack. The chink in the armor. And suddenly, it hit me. Not the satisfaction, not yet. But the possibility. Not just to get even, but to end this. To make it so Diane and Wade could never pull this on anyone again. That night, I called my dad's old friend, Reggie. He was a retired detective, now a part-time private investigator who occasionally helped people track down stolen property or prove fraud in court. My dad used to call him the Bloodhound in a Hawaiian shirt. Reggie and I had stayed loosely in touch over the years. Christmas cards, the occasional lunch, but I'd never asked him for anything. Until now. I met him at a small diner on the edge of town. He looked exactly the same. Same cargo shorts, same beat-up sunglasses, same mischievous grin that made you wonder whether he was planning a prank or solving a murder. "What's the job?" he asked, sipping his coffee like it was whiskey. I slid my phone across the table. These people tried to drain me dry, and now they're looking for their next victim. I want to know what they've been up to since I cut them off. Everything. Where they're staying. Who they've talked to. What they're planning. Reggie nodded. Anyone else involved? I shrugged. Just the two of them. But with Wade, it's never just anything. He leaned back, hands folded. All right, give me a week. I had no idea just how deep the rabbit hole went. While Reggie worked, I kept up appearances. Went to work. Fixed radios. Ate my groceries in silence. I kept things normal, but under the surface, I was calculating. Wade had given me a gift with those voicemails. He didn't know it, but he'd shown me where the cracks were. And now I had a way in. By the end of the week, Reggie came back with a thick folder and a look that told me I was right to be suspicious. You're going to want to sit down for this, he said. According to Reggie, Wade had been busy. He'd used my address, my house address, as a business registration for 2 different LLCs. One was for consulting, the other was a sketchy drop-shipping site selling overpriced wellness gadgets imported from God knows where. Neither business was profitable. Both were under investigation for filing fraudulent tax paperwork. But that wasn't the worst part. They were squatting again, this time in a rundown rental property owned by a retired couple who had moved to Florida for the winter. Wade had apparently convinced them he was a property manager, overseeing repairs. In reality, he'd broken in using a locksmith friend and was living rent-free with Diane while telling anyone who asked that the house was in escrow. Reggie showed me photos, Wade sitting on a porch swing, Diane smoking in the backyard, boxes stacked along the walls. The arrogance of it made my blood boil. And still, I waited. Because this wasn't about rage anymore. It was about precision. I started laying the groundwork. First, I contacted the actual homeowners of the house they were squatting in. An older couple named the Brenners. They were sweet, confused, horrified to learn someone was living in their home without permission. I didn't tell them everything, just enough to raise the alarm. They promised to take action, and soon. Then I filed a report with the Secretary of State regarding the LLCs Wade had fraudulently registered using my address. I sent in Reggie's documentation, photos, dates, and screenshots. I included a sworn statement detailing that Wade no longer lived at my address and had not been authorized to use it in any legal capacity. But I wasn't done yet, because I still needed the perfect moment. One that would humiliate him. Publicly. Undeniably. That came a few days later, when Wade sent another voicemail. This one sounded upbeat. Hey man, just wanted to say, I really appreciate you not ghosting me. I know I blew it, but I feel like we're on the mend. Look, I'm starting a live webinar next week for my wellness biz. It's all legit. Teaching people how to build income from home. If you want to come watch, I'll comp you a ticket. Might even use your story as a testimonial. You know, how I helped turn your life around. I nearly choked on my coffee. There it was. The moment. I reached out to a few local YouTubers who specialized in exposing online scammers, especially fake business gurus and dropshipping cons. Reggie gave me a contact who'd done exposés on influencers who faked their lifestyles. I sent them everything. Wade had no idea that his big debut would become part of an exposé titled, From Basement to BS, Inside the Mind of a Wannabe Scam King. The channel agreed to stream the whole thing live. Disguised as interested buyers, they joined his webinar, recorded the entire thing, and exposed his recycled scripts, fake testimonials, some stolen from Fiverr actors, and outrageous claims like, I made $75,000 last month from just my phone, while sitting in a folding chair next to a busted wall outlet. But I wasn't watching from behind a screen. I was watching from across the street. Because while Wade was live-streaming lies from the squat house's living room, the Brenners, with a locksmith and 2 cops in tow, arrived to take their property back. Diane answered the door mid-cigarette. Wade's voice could be heard through the cracked window, and that's when I told the bank, don't give me a loan, just invest in me. Then shouting, then confusion, then sirens, and then silence. I waited until the cops had walked them both out of the house. No cuffs, but definitely not on good terms. Wade was arguing. Diane looked exhausted. One officer handed them a citation and pointed toward the sidewalk where their duffel bags had been tossed. That's when I stepped out of my car. Wade's eyes landed on me. His face dropped. You, he said. I smiled. Me? You set us up. No, I said. You set yourself up. I just turned on the lights. He lunged forward, fists clenched. but one of the officers stepped between us. "Sir, I suggest you walk away." Wade glared at me for a long moment. Then he did. I stood there for a while longer, just watching them disappear down the sidewalk, dragging what was left of their delusion behind them. Not triumphant, not smug, just done. Or so I thought. But I should have known better. Because the final chapter wasn't written yet. And there was still one last card left to play. It's funny how quiet revenge can be. You expect fire and screaming, courtroom drama, cameras flashing. But sometimes, the most brutal justice unfolds in silence. In files, in signatures, in the slow, grinding gears of systems the guilty thought they could outsmart. I hadn't planned to see Wade or Diane again after the squatting bust. Watching them dragged out of that house was supposed to be my curtain call. But the universe, apparently, had one more scene for me. A final encore. And it came with paperwork. About a month after the webinar takedown, I got a letter in the mail from a State Department. Not a bill. Not a notice. It was a formal acknowledgement of my complaint. Luke Halter versus Wade Lockhart. Misuse of address and fraudulent business filings. They were opening a full investigation. Now, normally, these things take months. But Wade, bless him, had made it easy. The guy hadn't just listed my address. He'd used it as the registered mailing point for both his sketchy LLCs and several tax-related filings. Which meant the IRS had been sending notices to my house for over a year. Notices Wade never saw. Notices I, legally, wasn't required to forward. And buried in the fine print of one of those unopened letters? A failure to file penalty. The man owed over $14,000 in back taxes. The dominoes began to fall. The state revoked both his LLC licenses and flagged him for potential fraud. His accounts were frozen pending review. The merchant account tied to his dropshipping site was flagged by Stripe, which cut off his payment processor. Suddenly, his wellness gadget empire couldn't process payments, issue refunds, or pay vendors. And his name? Now on a digital blacklist for every small business grant or credit application flagged for potential misuse. Reggie texted me. "The dude's toast. You want me to keep digging?" I told him no. It was enough. But Diane, she was a different story. After the eviction, she went quiet. No voicemails. No texts. Just vanished. I figured maybe she'd taken her losses and moved on, found some new victim to leech off of. Until one day, while filing documents at a notary's office for my new electrician license, I saw a familiar name listed in the appointment log. Diane Lockhart, power of attorney reinstatement. That gave me pause. I waited. Watched from the parking lot as she emerged, sunglasses, scarf, thick folder in hand. She looked thinner, frilier, but still holding herself with that same tight-lipped pride. Like she was always one clever line away from being in control again. I followed up through the notary a few days later. Casually, legally. Turns out she had been trying to reinstate a previous power of attorney she once held over her late mother's estate. An estate with an outstanding dispute. Apparently, Diane had been trying to sell off land that wasn't legally hers. That was when the last piece clicked into place. She wasn't just broke. She was running out of people to use. Her own family had cut her off. I could have let it go. I really could have. But something about the way she had tried to rewrite the ending, to quietly recast herself as someone deserving of trust again, didn't sit right with me. Not after what she did to my father's house. To me. To the memory of the man who raised me. So I made one more call. Mrs. Porter, our neighbor, had a cousin named Jenna who worked in elder law. She also happened to handle estate disputes and family trust mismanagement. I shared what I'd found, what Diane was trying to do, and suggested someone reach out to Diane's relatives before any documents were improperly signed or submitted. By the end of that week, Diane's motion to reinstate power of attorney was not only rejected, it triggered a full audit of the estate she had touched. Her name was added to a growing list of parties of interest in a family lawsuit regarding coercion and document fraud. I didn't need to do anything else. Her own history did the heavy lifting. And that was my final move. No theatrics. No confrontation. Just a quiet, surgical strike. A few weeks later, I saw her again. I was at a small community craft fair, helping a friend set up a booth for vintage radio repairs. She was on the other side of the crowd, hair pulled back, cheap sunglasses, standing in line for a fried dough stand. She saw me, and I saw her. We didn't speak, but the look on her face told me everything I needed to know. She looked small, not sad, Not angry, just hollow, like a person whose tricks had finally run out. Wade, from what Reggie told me, had moved out of state, tried to reboot his life somewhere in Arizona, got caught shoplifting headphones from a Best Buy, and was currently on probation. His dropshipping dream had turned into a dead YouTube channel with 3 views and a single comment from a bot. And me? I was doing all right. The house was mine again, truly mine. The studio downstairs had grown into a proper side business. People brought me old radios, family heirlooms, stuff they thought was broken beyond repair. I brought them back to life. My job with Kinley turned into a full-time contract. We started taking on restoration gigs across the state. I wasn't rich, but I was stable, content, proud of the life I'd rebuilt from the ashes they tried to burn. I even started teaching a small class at the community center, Restoration 101. Teenagers, mostly. Kids who'd been told they weren't smart or skilled. I showed them how to fix things. Told them what my dad once told me. Don't throw away what still works. That goes for people too. One night, after class, I sat alone in the basement, now warm, full of tools, jazz playing low on the speakers. I looked around at everything that had happened, everything I'd built, everything I'd taken back, and I thought about the question people always ask at the end of stories like this. Was it worth it? My answer? Yes, because revenge isn't about making them feel what you felt. It's about making sure they never get to take from you again. And that night, as the record crackled into silence, I leaned back in my chair and whispered to no one. You were right, Dad. It was mine all along. The house, the peace, the strength, every inch of it. Mine.